Well, good morning, and thank you, thank you, Madeline, for that generous, overly generous introduction, and thank you for hosting this, Paula, and making me feel quite at home. I feel like I'm in Alabama right now. Thank you. So, ju- I just wanted to say again, thank you to JMA and the movement behind it for intervening in a process in Alabama that would have come to no good end for Alabama workers had it not been for that intervention. It's funny that this intervention by JMA was in Anniston, Alabama. Um, the other intervention in Anniston, Alabama didn't end quite well. They burned the freedom buses of the freedom riders. But that too was an intervention in Alabama. And why am I talking about that? The history of the Deep South in particular is part of the narrative of extraction. And before that, let me identify who I am. When I started meeting with Native American leaders in the Southwest 20 years ago, you have to give this introduction. I say, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. No, who are you from? I went to college in Knoxville. No, who are you from? And this came to my mind. I come from a people who were stolen from their land and taken to a land that was stolen from her people. That's where I'm from. And since I had that thinking about it, this extractive relationship to the South has continued. We are an internal colony of the United States. There's Great Britain, and then there's Kenya and Uganda. There's Pittsburgh, and then there's Birmingham. It's not the workers of Pittsburgh, not the workers of Britain, but it's the internal colonization of areas like the Deep South that created the great profit superstructure that built the mighty economic power of the United States by using the free labor of extracted people. How we began to fight that extractive process was that in the most extractive industries, the soil in agriculture and the mines and mills of coal and steel, particularly in Alabama where the ingredients for making iron weren't discovered until 1871. There was no Birmingham in 1870, but they discovered limestone, coal, and iron, and steel mill blossomed. Short the whole historical period, workers came there from newly freed slaves, and landless whites came to Birmingham to make their fortune. Italians, Greeks, Europeans, even people from New York City came to Birmingham to make their fortunes or make their money off of those who came there to make their fortunes. And immediately this prospect for a city on a hill became despair in the valley because the corporations began to use racism to divide the workers, black and white. That lasted until the late 70s. For instance, union organizing was disrupted when the Klan was able to put out leaflets saying, if the unions organize, the black workers will rape your wives and daughters. That is in the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, those flyers they put out. But it began to change during the organizing the South drive that happened in the Deep South under the Roosevelt administration that was pushed by the Communist Party of the United States. You had these black folks and white folks in the Deep South of Alabama joining the Communist Party and having union meetings under the guise of picnics because they didn't have union halls, under the guise of picnics. And black union organizers would have meetings under the guise of homecoming at the church, picnic on the grounds, for instance. And suspicious people come back, always having picnic on the grounds. They be talking organizing strategies and stuff. And men and women were involved in that effort. That began to develop leaders in the Deep South that carried the labor movement forward. And then came the McCarthy era, which really shut down organizing in the South, not just by the Communist Party, but by everybody. Because if you weren't a communist, you still called one. In the mid-50s and early 60s, they had billboards of Martin Luther King attending Highlander meeting, quote, quote, Dr. Martin Luther King meeting with the communists, and so, which was untrue, nevertheless. But you had Fred Shuttlesworth also, a working class guy who brought King to Birmingham. Dr. King provided the framework. Fred provided the backbone as well as the strategies for winning against an enemy like Bull Connor. But the next intervention we had was Job with Justice, which brought a new way of modern organizing to Alabama, including intersector, community and labor working together for common things. And its greatest benefit was the fact that we were able to stop the import of South African coal to the United States by building a union between SCLC and the labor union, particularly United Mining Workers. We had a large demonstration, the largest ever between labor and civil rights in downtown Birmingham. They called public attention to that, and it really literally embarrassed the company because they're saying, we're buying their coal, we're not supporting their policies. We say, yeah, right. And we talk about how research proved how buying the coal supported the policies as well. And now this is the third intervention. This third intervention is, how do we keep companies, well, Alabama's an extractive state. People take away our profits, they also take away our rights and limit our rights. JMA's intervention is now making possible the idea black, white, and brown workers getting a decent break by a Canadian company that came to Alabama to get cheap labor. And we told NFI, New Flyer, when you're in Birmingham, when you're in Alabama, don't treat us like you treat folks in Canada. Don't treat us like your friends do here in Alabama, right? Like we in Rome do as the Romans do. You got better manners than that. So they were able to be in community support as well as labor union support to organize a CBA, community benefits agreement, as well as a commitment that JMA will be at the table helping with the implementation of it, including the recruitment and training of workers. This is what intervention means in a place of always of extraction. This is addition to help overcome this policy of racism and extraction in Deep South. Thank you very much.
That is just scratching the surface of Scott's incredible history that resides in his heart and mind and in his house, actually, as well. I'm going to introduce Erica Iheme, but before I do that, I wanted to thank a few people. So first of all, we thanked Paula. Nika, Paula's grandson, back there, was here from last night, setting up and planning everything. Really, thank you, Nika. Our development department, led by our amazing Jenna Brown, Trisha Haniel Lopez, planned this event. We have a couple of other JMA staff, Melanie Prasad, who is our legal director, and Hector Wessa, who's our California director. Just wanted to give them a shout. And another board member, Cecilia Estolano. Thank you so much. And thanks to our other host, Talia Stagg, who's here, and Cecilia. So without further ado, Erica Iheme is, she's one of a kind, but she's not. She's one of a kind, as you will see, but one of the things that I think is extraordinary that Erica will talk about as our deputy director, as someone who was born and raised in the Deep South and left to become a union organizer, and because social justice work wasn't really something that you could find a job doing in the South, especially the Deep South. And as we've been building out our program, we're finding there's some incredible talent around the country that wants to move home. And so Erica is, I think, the first but not the last of a generation of black leaders, and especially black women leaders, who are leading the pathway home to justice. So, Erica Iheme.
Thank you, Madeline. She don't like when I say stuff like this, but this is my partner in crime. That's my road dog right there. Okay, so I'm Erica Iheme. I'm the Deputy Director with Jobs to Move America. I think it's appropriate for me to just start off and tell you a little bit about myself and kind of what brings me here. So I'm born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm one of 7 kids. My dad was a community leader growing up. So my whole life, I thought it was normal for 3-year-olds to knock on the door and tell people to go and vote. So I didn't realize that was like a thing. I thought it was like everybody did that. I mean, we did community cleanups. We volunteered with Greater Birmingham Ministry, go down there and pick up a gallon of paint and go and paint the senior citizens' homes or pick up trash. Like, it was just normal. My dad raised us to be civic participants, stewards of our community. So it's deeply ingrained in me to take care of my community and take care of my people. Like, that's my foundation. I grew up in Birmingham. Birmingham is deeply segregated, even in the 80s, 90s. Today, it's still deeply segregated. Black neighborhoods, black schools, white schools. The white schools are all in the county. They're great schools, unless you can afford to go to a private school. Till this day, I went through K through 12 and never went to school. 2 white people in my whole academic experience came to my school, and they weren't even in my grade, but everyone knew the 2 white kids that went to our school, Mikey and Harriet. So I'm to give you a demonstration of how segregated it was and is and continues to be in Birmingham. I mean, it's changing now, but that was my experience. I graduated from high school and went to Alabama A&M, which is a historically black university, where I studied urban planning. I thought I was going to build cities like Miss Cecilia does. But instead, I was recruited out of my classroom in my senior year on the last semester in the last 2 months by a union organizer who came to our class to talk about worker justice, worker power, unions. I'm like, what is this crazy talk? He's saying Alabama is lowering the standards of all the workers in America, and if Alabama don't get it together, the whole world is going to suffer. And I'm like, hold up. How are you going to come to my state talking this trash? So I challenged him in front of the class. You know, when you're young in college, you think you know everything. Well, he was very right. So I graduated from school and I became a union organizer. I organized with 2 top major unions in the United States for 17 years. I had a very successful organizing career. I organized everything from correctional officers to bus drivers to daycare workers to mostly any service worker except for janitors and security guards. Those are the only 2 industries I didn't work in, but I also did all of the public sector. And then I did Deep South organizing, which is every time I got an assignment in the South, my heart lit up. So I knew for a long time that I would end back up in the South. As an organizer, there is no work for us in the South. Like, people are not thinking, hey, we're going to spend a lot of money in the South, let's send some organizers to Birmingham. It's just before 2020 was not happening. So my goal was to get back home. And being on the road and seeing these wins, like seeing people win these union elections, seeing these community organizations come together with these unions and like actually see changes happen, for me was like very just transformative, because I was like, how am I out here traveling the country, being away from my family, winning for these people, and my people at home still suffering? Like, how is this? So I knew I had to get back home, and I remember right at the beginning of COVID, JMA was looking for a Southern director, and someone called me and was like, Erica, this place called Jobs to Move America is looking for a Southern director, and I read the job description, and I swear I saw your face. And I'm like, what? So I look at it, and I'm reading, and I'm like, that's me. That's me. That's me. It was so weird. In Birmingham. Mind you, I'm gone almost 20 years, cannot find a job in Alabama. I'm raising my kids away from their grandparents and their aunties and their uncles and their cousins. And I'm like, that's not real. So I dismissed it. And then COVID hit, and I was like, okay, let me see what Jobs Move America talking about. And I went back, and they had extended the job. And I was like, okay, let me apply. And that's the love story of how I met Jobs to Move America. And I remember when I first started working, I'm like, I was very skeptical. I'm like, why are you in Birmingham? What are you trying to do? You know, why do you, like, it was just unreal, because the vision that I've always had for my community, for Alabama, for my state, it was closely aligned with the vision of this organization. And as a Black woman, I'm very protective of being taken and used as a story, taken and used as a token. I'm very, very strong about that. So I was just trying to make sure that I'm not going to get pimped out, pretty much. And sure enough, Madeline said, no, Erica, this is your program. I said, well, what's the culture like? What's the work-life balance like? She was like, you do it. You set the tone. You decide it. You're building the team. You decide what it looks like. And that's how I knew that I was in the right place. Because for me, being an advocate for good jobs means that you're going to have quality of life. You're going to get paid a decent wage. You're going to be able to take care of your family, and you're going to be able to have safe shelter. And that for me is very important. And so I wanted to make sure that we model that from our job. Coming from labor, you don't always see that. So I wanted to make sure that we could model that type of culture in the place that we're trying to create and tell everybody that we need good jobs. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the vision. Madeline touched on JMA and the work, but the way I see Jobs to Move America is really a policy advocacy think tank that really focuses on using these opportunities to transform the way work happens and the way people experience work in the green manufacturing spaces. And so recognizing manufacturing is shifting to the South. In the last 30 years, we've seen a great migration of the Rust Belt have literally moved to the South. And so why is that? Scott touched on it. You know, it's extractive, right? We know that the labor is cheap. We know that we're not going to hold political officials are not going to hold corporations accountable or ask questions. They're not going to challenge them when things are going wrong. I talk about growing up in Birmingham. I grew up on the north side of Birmingham. It was in the middle of a major coal plant that builds steel and moves stuff back. ABC Coat, they just had a big article in ProPolitical last week about it, North Birmingham neighborhood. Look it up, and it'll just pretty much tell you what the conditions were we grew up in. So the passion about making sure that we hold these manufacturing corporations accountable is important because people are dying. My dad died at 37 years old, never smoked a cigarette, never drank, but was poisoned and had cancer. And so these are the types of things that happen when manufacturers set up around your communities, and they're putting these plants in the most undesirable locations: poor neighborhoods, black neighborhoods, rural communities. Those are the people that they're sacrificing pretty much to be able to get corporations their money that they're trying to accomplish. So that's why this work is so much important. And so what we have to figure out is, how do we pull community together with labor in a deep, real way to make sure that we're having conversations about improving the lives of workers. And so what we're seeing right now happen is labor is no longer calling on community groups when they need something, but instead sitting at the table with us and having a real conversation about what's the issues and how do we get to these issues. And sometimes the issue might not be something that's going to get that union immediate agenda met, but if they're in for the long game, we all benefit. So what we're trying to figure out is, how do we pull tables together, labor, faith-based, human rights, civil rights, all together, talking about the worker experience, how to create good jobs. What does a good job look like? Defining what's a good job. And so we know about the Rust Belt moving to the South, and people are saying, well, these are good jobs. Well, guess what? Your standards are pretty low in Alabama. We don't even have a minimum wage. We use the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. The average person probably make about $9, and in their mind, that's a good job. So when manufacturing come to Alabama and offer a $15, $17 an hour job, oh, this is a good job. Forget the fact that if your arm get cut off, you're pretty much dismissed and you never could work again in your life, which has happened and does happen quite regularly. We have to really get people to think that a good job is more than just a wage. It's also about your health care. It's also about your safety. It's also about dignity and respect. It's also about being able to go into your workplace and not worry about being challenged or dismissed or oppressed because of the color of your skin, your gender, your sexual preference. Like, all of these barriers are the reasons why we see people not sustain in the work or not even be able to get to the work. So we think about this new industry, what all this money is going into infrastructure updating, right? What that means is that we're trying to build smart, and we want to get employers that's going to develop manufactured goods that's going to be sustainable for our environment. I got some on my leg. So with that being said, what we have to figure out is that there's a transition, that we're in a moment of products that's being made in America that's never been built before. Whole new industry. So when is the best time to impact the industry? In transition. Not only are we in a transition, we're in a brand new industry. So we have an opportunity to set the tone of what these new jobs could look like. So we want to build green manufacturing in the South. We want to update our infrastructure. All this manufacturing is happening all over America. We want to update the infrastructure. What we're trying to make sure does not happen is that these brand new corporations and new industries come and establish themselves right on top of old Jim Crow. Because what happens in Alabama time and time again, the article I referenced, that's what it talks about. These bugs like my legs. This is what that article talks about. this old steel mill that sits in the middle of North Birmingham, my neighborhood. I walk past that building every day going to school. They sell it to another corporation. That corporation get as much as they can out of that building until they get tired of it. Then another corporation buy it, and they never make the repairs. They continue to pollute the community, and they continue to recycle the same workforce and have like these substandard jobs. So somebody got to ask the question of what's happening with the workers. What's the worker experience? So what we believe is that the community has to do that. The community has to call the questions. The community has to describe the issues. The community has to work to find solutions, which is why the CBAs are so important. So community benefits agreements. Basically what these are, like an agreement between the community and the employer that talks about taking on issues of discrimination, pathways to marginalized groups of workers, people who typically would not be able to get these better jobs. Women working in manufacturing spaces, that's an untraditional workspace for a woman in America, right? So we want to see more women getting into manufacturing. People who have felonies on their records, why should they be left out of the job market? When these green corporations are like first started in America, the people who benefited the most were not black people, people of color, marginalized groups. It's usually the white folks. And I mean, I love y'all, but at the end of the day, y'all got a better deal most of the time. So what's happening is we got to balance the table, right? We got to make sure that it's equal access to these jobs. We got to make sure that we see people of color get these jobs, but also be able to grow within that industry and become the leaders within that industry. And the only way we could do that is to really kind of hold people accountable and make them do it, because the truth is most people don't wake up and be like, I'm finna hire a whole bunch of black people and give them a good job today. It just don't happen, right? So we have to make people see it this way, and we have to help them get to a place to be able to make these changes, which is why this new flyer agreement is so important, right? Because now we're working next to the actual employer. This is a billion-dollar international Canadian-based bus manufacturer whose largest operation is the largest electric bus manufacturer in America, and one of their largest operations is right in Alabama. So these buses that you see, LA got like the largest fleet of electric buses. Guess where they're made at? In Anniston, Alabama. Guess what? The average person who built that bus will never be able to ride one. That's a problem, right? So what we have to figure out is, how do we create transportation systems in the South? If we improve the quality of jobs and access to good jobs, then you'll see the issues of housing go down. You'll see the issues of food insecurity go down. You'll see the issues of lack of education go down. Like, the system would correct if you take care of your people, but you're dealing with half of the black population living in the South, but the poverty is the highest, where, unemployment is not the issue. Unemployment is low, but poverty is the highest. What is that telling you? These are low-wage jobs that we're dealing with. So not only are we trying to recover from slavery, then we're trying to recover from Jim Crow. Now we're trying to just catch up and get equal footing in a COVID society where most people have lost their jobs and they're just getting like anything they can just to get back in the workforce. Like, it's stacked against us, but there's a whole new industry that's emerging with nothing but job opportunities. One of the most interesting conversations we had with New Flyer right after our partnership was agreed, and we met them in public, we met them in person. It was a very nice conversation. We enjoyed them thoroughly. They said, we really need you because we have all these production increase demands. We could build an extra building. That's not the problem. The problem is finding the human resources to actually staff the buildings. And you guys could be critical in helping us find the talent. So this is what partnership looks like. And so this is a path to good jobs. The only way you get to good jobs is being able to be in conversations with these employers, get them to understand the value of the partnership, create pathways to the job, pre-apprenticeship programs, discrimination processes so people aren't having uncomfortable experiences in the workplace, path to unionization, because in Alabama, the word union, we're going to shut it down. Like, that's just how it is. So, like, now these workers have an opportunity to organize with no opposition and neutrality. Like, it just don't happen. And that's what we have to see. We want to see more corporations coming forward and say, okay, let's talk partnership, because at the end of the day, these types of partnerships are going to raise their stock. It's going to make them more valuable. It's going to make them more sexy as their bidding contracts come up. Like, it's a benefit. And so we have to get them to understand the benefit. And so I'm going to go on and just kind of move this train along. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the other solidarity work that we do. So we have so many different buckets of work. People have a hard time. I know when I first got here, people had a hard time understanding, like, what does JMA do? What is JMA? Is it an organizing group? Is it a research? Like, what is it? The truth is, we all that. Like, we lead in research. We're about revealing the narrative, setting the tone, and bringing the conversations to the table that's not being had and need to be had. We also are about building community, building coalition around a common cause, and in this case is empowering workers and creating good jobs in green manufacturing spaces. But it's also about amplification and telling the story and making sure that the masses understand what's happening. But it's also about changing the policy and fixing the rules to make sure that there's opportunities to be able to make change in these workers' lives on the basic level. Like in Alabama, transparency is an issue. We've given away over $4 billion in the last 30 years to corporations to come to Alabama, right? But what's in those deals? Nobody know. And if you send a request to find out, you ain't gonna get an answer. So how can we really fix a system if we don't really understand what's the transactions? And so we have to figure out transparency, ban the secret deals. Ban the secret deals. And that's what the type of policy that we need to be talking about. And so to talk about the Southern program and what the possibilities are, the table is set. We got our coalition friends. We have the right team. We have the team are pretty much Alabama based and homegrown. It's interior. We have like a 12-year state rep who's a policy and relationship expert. We have an investigative reporter who's now a strategic campaigner and researcher. We have another brother that's just like me, grew up and born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, went away, worked for the labor movement for 15 years, came home, and now he's doing this thing. We found a neighborhood guy who came from the same neighborhood a generation before me, came from the streets, and now he's like a bomb organizer. Like, we got people. The talent is here. Like, people didn't think that investing in the South was worth it because they thought it was like a money pit, like a hole in the bottom of your purse. But the truth is, people has already been doing the work. Greater Birmingham Ministries been doing the work. NAACP been doing the work. Alabama Rise been doing the work. Our coalition partners been doing the work. This is nothing new. What we've done is we've been able to pull a table together to facilitate a relationship where we will work together on the common goal of improving the lives of workers. For too often we go down to the Capitol and we talk about all these different things we want to see change, but we forget to talk about the worker. We have a duty as the Alabama Coalition of Community Benefits to make sure that the worker conversation enters every room that happens in Alabama. So at the end of the day, we need widespread partnership. We need people to help us get there. People who get it need to help us get there. We have very limited capacity in Alabama. We have very limited infrastructure in Alabama. We're attempting to build the infrastructure, and I think we have the foundation laid. Now what we have to figure out is how do we sustain the work that we've started on and take it to the next level? What does 15 years from now look like? Think about Georgia. I remember in 2004 when they were talking about, doing updating the Voting Rights Act, the Federal Voting Rights Act, and we did a rally in Georgia, and I remember Jesse Jackson came. It was 50,000 people hit the streets that year, and there was a commitment made that we were going to knock on every door in Georgia, and we were going to find our voting blocks, and we were going to activate them. There was not a lack of voters in Georgia. It wasn't that people were all voting the wrong way in Georgia. The issue is that we had sleeping voting blocks throughout the state. And we discovered that about 3 years after that, when we started finding all these people who just never voted before, never registered before, never even participated. And what they've done over the last, it's almost 20 years ago, 15 to 20 years ago, Georgia woke up those sleeping voting blocks, and you'll look at that map and you'll see all those pockets, those concentrated areas of poverty and people of color. That's what flipped Georgia, and it took them almost 20 years to get there. So why can't Alabama do the same? We need to understand what Alabama look like, where our sleeping voting blocks are, and activate them. But the only way we'll be able to do that is it's going to take deep research, deep community engagement, deep partnership building that focuses on civic engagement and actually exercise that muscle. Right now we got baby muscles. We got to strengthen those muscles so we get some big boy muscles, right? And the only way we do that is through research, with support, partnership, and resources. And everything that happens in Alabama benefits or take away from everything that happens in every part of America. So as long as we allow Alabama to continue to be the bottom floor and lower the standards, we're pulling everybody down with us. And so as the South goes, America. And so what we have to make sure we do is we in conversation and we're understanding the impacts. What happens in California impacts Alabama. What happens in California helped us get the CBA in Alabama. So there's a direct correlation. So that's why you being here today, friends, is so important, because you need to know firsthand what's the deal, what's happening on the ground, why does it matter to Alabama, what happens in California, and vice versa, because at the end of the day, it's going to take our friends around us to help carry us along. We're the little tink that's kind of walking behind y'all like, come on, tink. Well, we're going to do that together. We're going to hold each other's hands and we're going to walk together to be able to get to the victory. And for me, the victory is workers in Alabama having good jobs, workers in Alabama having clean water, workers in Alabama having safe homes, good schools, grocery stores, access to food. And the only way we do that is if we demand good jobs. And if you got a good job, you got the space and the mind to be able to advocate for those other pieces of your life. And it's all intersected, and we have to understand that. So with that being said, I'm going to conclude. I think I carried on quite a bit, probably too long. Nobody flagged me down, so I think I'm safe. But thank y'all for enduring this talk. I look forward to speaking and meeting with each of you. Feel free to grab me if you have questions. But yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.